My sister-in-law brought a gift to my daughter's party and said, "This is for your mom to wear so you remember not to be like her." She was standing in front of 30 kids and their parents holding a wrapped box with my name on it, even though it was my daughter Lucy's 7th birthday, not mine. "This isn't my party, why did you get me something?" I tried to take the box to open later, but my sister-in-law Tara pulled it back and started unwrapping it herself. Because Lucy needs to understand who her mother really is. Everyone does. She pulled out a black t-shirt and held it up for everyone to see. Across the front, in huge white letters, it said, D-U-M-B. The parents stopped talking and the kids stared confused. What is this? I reached for the shirt, but Tara held it higher and turned so everyone could see it clearly. It's your new uniform. I had 5 made so you can wear one every day to remind Lucy not to end up like you. She pulled out 4 more shirts from the box, all identical with dumb printed across the front. My husband Paul was at the grill with his brother Jason and hadn't noticed what was happening yet. You bought me shirts calling me dumb at my daughter's birthday? I kept my voice low, trying not to make a scene in front of the children, but Tara spoke louder. Not calling you dumb, confirming you're dumb. There's a difference. See, Lucy's been saying she wants to be just like mommy when she grows up, and that's terrifying because you barely graduated high school and work at a grocery store. She needs better role models. She walked over to where Lucy was sitting with her friends. Lucy, sweetie, your aunt got these shirts to help you remember that education matters. Your mom didn't go to college like me, and look where she ended up scanning groceries while I'm a regional manager at a tech company. Lucy looked confused and hurt. My mom's not dumb, Aunt Tara. Tara patted her head condescendingly. Of course she's not, sweetie. She's just academically challenged. That's why the shirt says dumb, which stands for didn't understand more books. She turned to the other parents. I made that up. Clever, right? Better than her just being regular dumb. Paul finally noticed the commotion and came over. What's going on? Tara showed him the shirts. I got your wife her birthday present early. Though technically it's for Lucy's future. If she sees her mom wearing these, maybe she'll study harder to avoid the same fate. Paul grabbed the shirts from her. Are you insane? Why would you make these? His brother Jason walked up with his beer. Actually, I helped design them. Tara said it would be motivational. You know, like those workout shirts that say beast mode, but instead of pretending Nicole's strong, we're acknowledging she's not smart. He high-fived Tara. The font choice was mine, big and bold so no one misses it. Lucy started crying and her friends' parents were gathering their kids to leave. One mother stopped next to me. This is inappropriate. We're going. But Tara blocked her path. Wait, you should hear the best part. Each shirt has something different on the back. She turned the shirt around. On the back it said, ask me about my GED. She doesn't even have a GED, she has a regular diploma, I said, but Tara rolled her eyes. Same difference. Public school diploma from that trash district might as well be a GED. The other shirts say, college wasn't for me, and I peaked at 17, and my personal favorite, my kid's smarter than me already. She held up the last one proudly. This one's true. Lucy tested into gifted classes, which Nicole never could have done. Must be Paul's genes, thank God. More parents were leaving, and Lucy was sobbing now. I tried to comfort her, but Tara pulled her away. Don't cry, sweetie. This is for your own good. You need to see what happens when people don't value education. Your mom makes $11 an hour. 11. I make that in 3 minutes. If she'd gone to college like I told Paul to make her do, she wouldn't need these shirts. Paul's mother arrived late and saw the chaos. What happened? Tara rushed over to her. Mom, I was just giving Nicole her birthday gift. Educational shirts to wear around Lucy. She showed her mother-in-law the shirts. Remember how you said you were worried Lucy would inherit Nicole's lack of ambition? This fixes that. Paul's mother took the shirt and examined it. This is cruel, Tara. But Tara snatched it back. Cruel is letting Lucy think working retail is acceptable. Nicole's been at that store for 9 years. 9 years of scanning items and saying have a nice day. No promotions, no advancement, just existing. She turned to the remaining parents. I'm trying to save my niece from that fate. Is that so wrong? Jason jumped in. She's got a point. Kids need to see consequences. Nicole's the consequence of not trying hard in school. He grabbed one of the shirts. These should be in every household where parents didn't go to college. Keep kids motivated. I finally found my voice. I stepped toward Tara and grabbed one of the shirts from her hands. She needed to leave right now before I said something I would regret in front of all these children. My voice came out louder than I meant it to. Get out of my house. Tara's eyebrows went up and she smiled like she'd won something. See? This is exactly what I mean. You're getting emotional instead of using logic. If you were smarter, you'd see I'm trying to help Lucy. She started folding the shirts slowly and carefully like we had all the time in the world. Each fold was precise, and she smoothed out every wrinkle with her palm. These shirts are going right here on the gift table so everyone can see them. Maybe some of the other parents will want me to make them sets too. She placed the stack on the corner of the table between a wrapped doll and a craft kit. Jason finished his beer and crushed the can. We should probably go anyway. I've got a conference call in an hour. He walked toward their car without saying goodbye to anyone. Tara followed him but turned back at the gate. Think about what I said, Nicole. Lucy deserves better than watching you settle for minimum wage. Paul stood next to the grill holding the spatula but not moving. His mother had her arms around Lucy, who was still crying, into her shoulder. The grandmother kept patting Lucy's back and making soft shushing sounds. The parents who were still here grabbed their kids' hands and started walking toward their cars. Nobody looked at me when they passed. One dad gave Paul a quick nod, but that was it. A mom I'd talked to at the school pickup last week hurried by with her twin boys. I tried to smile at her, but she pretended to be busy getting her purse out of her bag. The birthday cake sat untouched on the table with 7 candles that hadn't been lit yet. Streamers hung from the fence and balloons bobbed in the breeze. Lucy had picked out everything herself. She wanted purple and silver because those were her favorite colors this month. I watched the last family leave through the gate and realized every kid at that party would tell their parents what happened tonight. Those parents would tell other parents. By Monday, everyone at Lucy's school would know her aunt made shirts calling her mom dumb. The backyard was empty except for our family. Paul put down the spatula and walked toward the house without saying anything. His mother looked at me over Lucy's head with an expression I couldn't read. Lucy lifted her face and her eyes were red and puffy. Why did Aunt Tara say those things about you, Mommy? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What was I supposed to tell her? That adults sometimes hurt each other for reasons that don't make sense? That her aunt thought being smart meant having a college degree? I knelt down next to her. Sometimes people say mean things when they're upset, sweetie. Lucy wiped her nose on her grandmother's shirt. But she wasn't upset. She was smiling. Paul's mother met my eyes, and I saw she understood this was worse than we'd both realized. I found Paul in the garage an hour later. He was sitting on an overturned bucket staring at the wall where we kept the gardening tools. Lucy had finally cried herself to sleep upstairs after asking me 3 more times why Aunt Tara hated me. I stood in the doorway waiting for him to notice me, but he didn't turn around. How could you let your sister do that to our daughter? My voice echoed in the concrete space. Paul rubbed his face with both hands. I didn't know she was planning it. The words sounded hollow, like he was reading from a script. You were standing right there, Paul. You heard everything she said and you just froze. He finally looked at me and his eyes were tired. What did you want me to do? Start a fight at Lucy's birthday party? I felt something hot building in my chest. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted you to tell your sister to shut up and get out. I wanted you to defend your wife and daughter instead of acting like a statue. He stood up and walked past me into the house without answering. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tara holding up those shirts and all those parents staring. Around 2 a.m, I got out of bed and went downstairs. The shirts were still on the gift table where Tara left them. I picked up the top one and unfolded it. The white letters looked even bigger in the dark kitchen. I turned it around and read the back. My kid's smarter than me already. My hands started shaking and then I was crying again. Not the quiet kind of crying, but the kind where you can't catch your breath. Paul came down the stairs in his pajamas. He stopped when he saw me holding the shirt. For a long time, he just stood there. Then he walked over and took the shirt from my hands. He looked at it for a minute and his face changed. She really did this. I wiped my eyes. Yeah, Paul, she really did. He sat down at the kitchen table, still holding the shirt. I'm sorry. I should have stopped her. It was the first real thing he'd said since the party ended. The next morning, Lucy wouldn't get out of bed. I tried 3 times to get her dressed for school, but she pulled the covers over her head. I don't want to go. Everyone's going to make fun of me. I sat on the edge of her bed. Why would they make fun of you, sweetie? She peeked out from under the blanket. Because Aunt Tara said you're dumb. The other kids heard her. They're going to laugh at me. I felt my throat get tight. This was exactly what I was afraid of. I pulled out my phone and called work. My manager answered on the 3rd ring. Hey, I need to take a sick day. It was the first time I'd called in sick in 2 years. I spent the whole day with Lucy. We made cookies and watched her favorite movie, and I told her over and over that having a college degree doesn't make someone smart or important. I'm not sure she believed me, but at least she stopped crying. Paul's mother called while I was washing dishes that evening. Nicole, I need to apologize. I should have stopped Tara before she opened that box. I put the phone on speaker and kept scrubbing a pan. Yeah, you should have. There was a long pause. This isn't the first time she's made comments about you not going to college. She brings it up at family gatherings when you're not around. I stopped scrubbing. What kind of comments? She sighed. Things about how Paul could have done better. How Lucy will probably end up working retail too. I always told her to stop, but I never really pushed back hard enough. I gripped the edge of the sink. Why are you telling me this now? Another pause. Because I'm realizing Tara has always been like this. Even when we were kids, she had to be the best at everything. She couldn't stand when other people got attention. I thought she'd grow out of it, but she just got better at hiding it. I thought about how confident Tara always seemed, how she talked about her job and her salary and her kids' achievements. She doesn't seem insecure. Paul's mother laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. That's the thing about insecure people, Nicole. They're the best at pretending they're not. Tuesday morning, I drove Lucy to the school. She held my hand tight the whole walk from the parking lot to her classroom. Her teacher was standing by the door greeting students. She smiled at Lucy, but then pulled me aside. Mrs. Carter, can I speak with you for a moment? My stomach dropped. Lucy went inside and I followed the teacher a few steps down the hallway. Several parents called me yesterday about an incident at a birthday party. They said something inappropriate happened. I felt my face get hot. Of course the parents had called. I gave her a quick version of what Tara did. The teacher's expression went from curious to shocked to angry. That's horrible. I'm so sorry that happened. She looked back at her classroom where Lucy was putting her backpack in her cubby. I'll keep an eye out for any bullying toward Lucy. If anything happens, I'll handle it immediately. I thanked her and left before I started crying again. Work that evening was busy, and I was grateful for the distraction. I scanned groceries and made small talk with customers, and tried not to think about Tara's voice saying I'd been doing this for 9 years with no advancement. My coworker Hadley came over during a slow moment. Hey, you okay? You look like you've been crying. I shook my head, but then everything just came out. I told her about the shirts and what Tara said in front of everyone and how Lucy was scared to go to the school. Hadley's face got red while I talked. Are you serious? Who does something like that? She looked around to make sure our manager wasn't nearby. That woman sounds miserable. Like genuinely miserable. Happy people don't tear other people down like that. I felt something loosen in my chest. You think so? Hadley nodded hard. I know so. She's probably jealous of something you have that she doesn't. Maybe your relationship with Lucy. Maybe something else. But normal people don't custom order shirts to humiliate someone. It was the first time since the party that I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy for being this upset. Wednesday night, Paul came home from work and found me making dinner. I think we should invite Tara and Jason over this weekend to talk things through. I stopped chopping vegetables. What? He loosened his tie. We need to clear the air. This tension isn't good for anyone. I put down the knife. Have you been texting with her? He looked away, which was all the answer I needed. She's my sister, Nicole. I can't just cut her off. I felt anger rising up again. I'm not asking you to cut her off, Paul. I'm asking you to wait until she apologizes to Lucy. He shook his head. You're being stubborn. You're making this harder on everyone. I stared at him. I'm being stubborn? Your sister publicly humiliated me and traumatized our daughter, and I'm the one making things hard? He grabbed a beer from the fridge. You know what I mean. If we just sit down and talk like adults, this will blow over. I turned back to the cutting board. No, Paul. Not until she apologizes to Lucy. That's not negotiable. Lucy woke up screaming at midnight. I ran to her room and found her sitting up in bed with tears streaming down her face. They were all laughing at me. Everyone at the school was pointing and laughing and calling you stupid. I climbed into bed with her and held her while she cried. It was just a dream, sweetie. Just a bad dream. She wouldn't let go of me. Every time I tried to get up, she grabbed my arm. Don't leave, Mommy. Please don't leave. I ended up sleeping on her floor with a pillow and blanket. The carpet was hard and my back hurt, but I stayed there all night. Watching her sleep, I realized this wasn't going away anytime soon. The party was one day, but the damage was going to last much longer than that. Thursday morning, I woke up still tired from sleeping on Lucy's floor and checked my phone while making coffee. There was a text from Tara sent at 6 in the morning. Hope you've calmed down enough to see I was trying to help Lucy have ambition. She needs to understand the importance of education, and sometimes tough love is necessary. Let me know when you're ready to talk like adults. I read it 3 times looking for an apology that wasn't there. No sorry for humiliating you. No, I shouldn't have done that at Lucy's party. Just more justification wrapped up like she was doing me a favor. The shock I'd been feeling since Sunday started shifting into something harder and hotter in my chest. I deleted the text without responding and got Lucy ready for school. She moved slowly through breakfast and didn't talk much. When I dropped her off, she hugged me longer than usual before going inside. Paul came home Friday evening carrying flowers from the grocery store where I work. He set them on the kitchen table and kissed my cheek. These are for you. I talked to my family and they think maybe we're all overreacting a little. I was stirring pasta sauce and didn't turn around. Overreacting to what exactly? He loosened his tie and grabbed a beer from the fridge. The whole shirt thing. Mom says Tara just has a direct communication style and doesn't always realize how she comes across. Everyone agrees it was poorly executed, but her heart was in the right place. I turned off the stove and faced him. Do you think humiliating your wife in front of 30 people is direct communication? Paul looked at the floor. I think she went too far with the presentation, but the message wasn't wrong. Lucy does need to value education. I felt something crack inside me. The message wasn't wrong? That I'm dumb and Lucy shouldn't be like me? He rubbed his face with both hands. That's not what I meant. I'm caught in the middle here, Nicole. She's my sister and you're my wife, and everyone wants me to fix this, but I don't know how. Saturday morning, Lucy came into the kitchen where I was making pancakes and sat at the table watching me. Mom, do you wish you did something else? I flipped a pancake and looked at her. What do you mean, sweetie? She picked at the placemat. Like instead of working at the store. Do you wish you had a different job? I brought her a plate and sat down next to her. I like my job. I get to talk to people and help them find what they need. Lucy poured syrup slowly. Is scanning groceries hard? The question made my throat tight because I heard Tara's voice in it. Not hard exactly, but it takes practice to do it fast and remember all the codes. Why are you asking? She took a tiny bite. Just wondering. Sunday afternoon, she asked if my job was boring, and Monday morning, she wanted to know how much money I made. Each question felt like Tara had planted seeds in her brain that were growing into shame. I watched my daughter getting quieter and smaller and felt rage building. Monday at work, my phone rang during my break. It was Lucy's teacher, Miss Roberts. I wanted to let you know something that happened during sharing time today. Lucy told the class her mom is academically challenged. She used those exact words, which seemed unusual for a 7-year-old. I closed my eyes and leaned against the break room wall. What did the other kids say? Miss Roberts spoke carefully. Most of them didn't understand what academically challenged meant, but Lucy seemed embarrassed when she said it, like she was ashamed. Is everything okay at home? I explained about the party and the shirts without going into too much detail. Miss Roberts was quiet for a moment. That's completely inappropriate. No wonder Lucy is struggling. I'll watch for any issues with the other children, but you might want to consider talking to the school counselor. I thanked her and hung up, then sat in the break room staring at nothing. Tara's poison was spreading beyond our house into Lucy's classroom, and soon every kid would know her mom was dumb. I called the school when I got home and asked to make an appointment with the counselor. The secretary said Cordelia May had an opening that afternoon at 4 if I could bring Lucy in. We drove to the school and Lucy held my hand tight, walking down the hallway to the counselor's office. Cordelia was younger than I expected, with curly red hair and a warm smile. She had toys and books arranged on shelves and invited Lucy to sit wherever she felt comfortable. Lucy chose a beanbag chair and pulled her knees up to her chest. Cordelia asked her how school was going and if anything was bothering her. Lucy looked at me, then back at Cordelia. My aunt said my mommy didn't read enough books. She said mommy is academically challenged and I shouldn't be like her. Then she started crying. Big tears running down her face while she tried to explain about the shirts and the party and how all the parents left. I moved to comfort her, but Cordelia shook her head slightly, so I stayed in my chair watching my daughter fall apart. Cordelia handed Lucy tissues and waited until she calmed down. That sounds really scary and confusing. Can I ask you something, Lucy? Lucy nodded and wiped her nose. What kinds of things is your mom good at? Lucy thought for a minute. She makes me feel better when I'm sad. And she fixes things around the house, like when my bike chain came off. And she always remembers everyone's favorite foods, even at big family dinners. Cordelia wrote notes on a pad. Those are important skills. Making people feel better and fixing problems and remembering details about people you care about. Do you think those things matter? Lucy nodded slowly. My aunt says only college matters, though. She says people who don't go to college don't have good jobs. Cordelia leaned forward. There are lots of different ways to be smart, Lucy. Your mom sounds smart in ways that help people every single day. Some people are good at reading books, and some people are good at understanding feelings, and both kinds of smart are valuable. Lucy looked at me and I saw something shift in her expression. Not all the way back to normal, but like maybe she was starting to question what Tara told her. That evening, after Lucy went to bed, Paul's mother called. I talked to Tara today and she feels bad about how things went at the party. She wants you to know she was motivated by concern for Lucy's future. I put the phone on speaker and kept folding laundry. That's not an apology. Paul's mother sighed. She's trying, Nicole. You know how Tara is. She doesn't always express herself well, but her intentions were good. I picked up one of Paul's shirts and folded it harder than necessary. Her intentions don't matter. She humiliated me in front of my daughter and 30 other people. She made Lucy ashamed of me. Good intentions don't excuse cruelty. Paul's mother was quiet. I understand you're hurt, but families need to forgive each other. Holding grudges only makes everyone miserable. I stopped folding. I'm not holding a grudge. I'm protecting my daughter from someone who thinks it's okay to tear me down to teach her a lesson. That's not the same thing. Work Tuesday felt like the only place I could breathe normally. Hadley asked how Lucy was doing, and I told her about the counseling appointment. She got mad all over again. That woman needs therapy herself if she thinks publicly shaming someone helps kids learn. Other coworkers came over during slow times to chat, and several customers I'd known for years stopped to talk. Mrs. Bell asked about Lucy's birthday, and I gave her the short version. She shook her head. Family can be cruel sometimes, but you're a good mother. I see how you treat people here, and that matters more than any degree. I rang up her groceries and felt something loosen in my chest. I'd been working at this store for 9 years and built relationships with people who saw me as more than just the person scanning their items. Tara could call my job worthless, but these connections meant something. They were real, and they mattered even if they didn't come with a fancy title. Wednesday night, Paul came home looking exhausted. He dropped his briefcase by the door and sat on the couch without taking off his shoes. My family group chat has been going crazy. Everyone's talking about the situation. I sat next to him. What are they saying? He rubbed his eyes. Most of them think Tara went too far, but they also think you're being too sensitive. Jason keeps defending her, and my cousins are split. Mom's trying to play peacemaker, and my dad says we all need to grow up and move on. I felt my marriage straining under the weight of all these opinions. What do you think, Paul? He looked at me, and I saw how tired he was of being pulled in different directions. I think my sister was cruel, and you have every right to be angry. But I also think we can't avoid her forever, and at some point we need to figure out how to coexist as a family. I wanted to scream that coexisting shouldn't mean accepting cruelty, but I was too tired to fight. Lucy's next counseling session Thursday afternoon revealed more damage than I'd realized. Cordelia asked her how school was going, and Lucy said her stomach hurt every morning before class. What makes your stomach hurt? Cordelia asked gently. Lucy twisted her hands together. I'm worried the other kids found out about my birthday party. What if they know Aunt Tara thinks my mom is dumb? What if they start thinking it too? Cordelia looked at me with concern. Lucy's experiencing anxiety related to the incident. I'd like to continue seeing her weekly for now, and I think family therapy might be beneficial. After the session, I mentioned family therapy to Paul, and he got defensive. We don't need therapy. We need my sister to apologize and everyone to calm down. Therapy makes it sound like we have serious problems. I stared at him. Paul, our daughter is having stomach aches because she's afraid kids will find out her aunt publicly humiliated her mother. That is a serious problem. He refused to look at me when I told him that, just stared at his coffee mug like it might give him an answer he wanted to hear better than mine. I went upstairs to check on Lucy before heading to my shift, and found her sitting on her bed holding one of her stuffed animals and staring at nothing. She looked up when I came in and tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I kissed her forehead and told her I loved her, and she nodded but didn't say it back, which made my chest hurt in a way I couldn't fix by just being there. Work became the only place I felt like myself anymore. I picked up every extra shift the store offered and spent my days scanning groceries and bagging items and helping customers find what they needed. The repetitive motions calmed me down, and I didn't have to think about Tara or Paul or Lucy's sad face. Matthew noticed after about a week of me working doubles and closing shifts that I hadn't taken off. He caught me in the break room during my lunch and sat down across from me with his own sandwich. He asked if everything was okay at home, and I felt my eyes start to water before I could stop them. I tried to laugh it off and said I just needed the money, but he gave me this look that said he knew I was lying. He told me he'd been a manager long enough to recognize when someone was hiding at work instead of going home. That made me cry for real, and I had to grab napkins from the dispenser to wipe my face. He waited until I calmed down and then said, if I ever needed to talk, his door was always open. The kindness in his voice broke something loose in me, and I ended up telling him about the party and the shirts, and how my own family thought I was worthless. Matthew listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he shook his head and said that was one of the cruelest things he'd heard in his 15 years managing this store. Then he surprised me by saying he had an MBA from a good business school, but he'd started here as a bag boy when he was 16. He worked his way up over the years because he genuinely loved the work and the people in this community. He said education opened doors, but what mattered more was showing up every day and treating people with respect, and being someone others could count on. I'd never thought about my own work that way before. I just saw it as a job that paid the bills and nothing more. But Matthew made it sound like dedication and reliability were valuable things worth being proud of. He told me I was one of his best employees because I never called in sick, and I helped train new people without being asked, and customers requested my register line because I made them feel welcome. Hearing that made me realize I'd let Tara's voice become louder in my head than my own sense of what I was good at. Friday rolled around and Paul mentioned his family was having a gathering at his parents' house. He said it casually, like of course we'd be going, and I felt my stomach drop. I told him I wasn't ready to see Tara yet, and he got this frustrated look on his face. He said I was punishing his whole family for his sister's mistake and making him choose between his wife and everyone else. I tried to explain that I wasn't punishing anyone, but I needed time to heal before I could sit across a table from the woman who humiliated me in front of 30 people. Paul said families fight sometimes and we needed to move past it. He grabbed his keys and left without waiting for me to respond. Lucy heard us arguing and came downstairs asking if Daddy was mad at me. I told her no, and that adults sometimes disagree, but it would be okay. She didn't look convinced. Paul went to the gathering alone, and I spent the evening helping Lucy with a puzzle and trying not to watch the clock. He came home after midnight, stumbling through the front door, and I knew immediately he was drunk. I helped him to the couch and got him water, and he started talking about how everyone at the party asked where Lucy and I were. He said Tara made a joke about me probably needing the weekend to study for my GED test. Some of his cousins laughed, and his mom tried to change the subject, but the damage was done. Paul admitted this while looking at the floor, and I felt something crack inside my chest. I asked him if he defended me, and he said he told them to drop it, but his voice was quiet and ashamed. I realized then that he hadn't actually stood up for me. He'd just asked people to stop talking about it, which wasn't the same thing at all. I went upstairs and cried into my pillow so Lucy wouldn't hear. Saturday morning, I woke up before Paul and made coffee and waited for him in the kitchen. When he finally came down looking hungover, I told him we needed marriage counseling. He groaned and said I was being dramatic and that families fight sometimes. I cut him off and said what happened at Lucy's party wasn't a fight. It was calculated public humiliation designed to make me feel small in front of everyone we knew. He tried to argue that Tara just had strong opinions about education, and I snapped back that strong opinions don't require custom-printed shirts. Paul said counseling was expensive and we didn't need it. I told him we couldn't afford not to go because I didn't trust him anymore to protect our family from his sister's cruelty. That got his attention. He stared at me for a long moment and I saw him realize I was serious. He said he'd think about it, which wasn't yes, but it wasn't no either. Sunday afternoon, Lucy asked me if we were going to see Aunt Tara again. I said maybe someday when everyone had calmed down and she looked relieved instead of sad. That surprised me, so I asked her why. She twisted her hands together and admitted that Aunt Tara always made comments about our house being smaller than hers or our car being older. She said Tara would point out that her kids had nicer toys and went to a better school. I felt anger wash over me as I realized this superiority thing had been going on for years. I'd been too polite to call it out and too worried about causing family drama. Lucy said she loved Aunt Tara, but sometimes being around her made her feel bad about our family. I hugged her and told her our house and car and everything we had was enough, and that comparing ourselves to others was a trap that made nobody happy. Monday I went back to work, and Matthew pulled me aside before my shift started. He said he'd been thinking about our conversation from last week and wanted to talk to me about something. We went to his office and he closed the door and told me he'd been impressed with my reliability and problem-solving skills over the years. Then he said there was an assistant manager position opening up next month and asked if I'd be interested in applying. I laughed because I thought he was joking, but his face stayed serious. I told him I didn't have the qualifications for management and he smiled like he'd been expecting me to say that. He said I'd been informally managing shifts for years whenever I helped train new employees, or handled difficult customers, or covered for people who called in sick. The company valued experience over degrees, and he thought I'd be perfect for the role. I went home that night feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I told Paul about the assistant manager opportunity while we were making dinner, and instead of being excited, he got quiet. He said I should be realistic about my limitations. I stopped chopping vegetables and stared at him. I asked what he meant, and he said management positions required skills I might not have. I realized in that moment that he'd internalized his sister's view of me. He actually believed I wasn't capable of more than scanning groceries. Something shifted in how I saw our marriage right then. I'd been thinking of us as a team, but he'd been thinking of himself as better than me this whole time. I finished making dinner in silence, and we ate without talking, and I wondered how long he'd felt this way. Lucy had her counseling session with Cordelia later that week, and I sat in the waiting room while they talked. When the session ended, Cordelia asked to speak with me and said Lucy had a good week at the school with no incidents. She said Lucy was processing the party trauma in healthy ways and developing resilience. Then she told me something that made my eyes water. Lucy had mentioned in session that she'd been watching me more carefully lately. She noticed that I helped people at work and at home. She noticed that I was kind to strangers and patient with her when she was upset. She said those things made her proud to be my daughter. Cordelia smiled and said Lucy was learning that worth came from character, not credentials. I left that session feeling like maybe we'd get through this after all. I walked to the break room Tuesday morning and grabbed the assistant manager application from the bulletin board. My hands shook while I unfolded it and read through the requirements. 9 years of experience preferred. I had that. Strong customer service skills. I'd helped hundreds of customers every shift. Ability to train and supervise team members. I'd trained every new hire for the past 3 years. I sat down with a pen and started filling in the boxes. Under accomplishments, I wrote perfect attendance for 9 years straight. I listed the employee training sessions I'd led, even though nobody called them that officially. I wrote about the customer service awards from corporate that came every year and sat in my locker because I never thought they mattered. The application asked why I wanted the position, and I stared at the blank space for 10 minutes. Finally, I wrote that I loved helping people and wanted to grow with the company. It sounded simple, but it was true. I turned in the application to Matthew's office before my shift started, and he smiled when he saw it. He told me he'd schedule my interview for next week, and I nodded, even though my stomach felt tight with worry. Hadley found me stocking shelves an hour later and pulled me aside near the dairy section. She said she heard I applied for assistant manager and started listing things I was good at before I could respond. Inventory management because I always knew when we were running low on popular items. Conflict resolution because I'd calmed down angry customers who other workers couldn't handle. Team coordination because people asked me questions instead of bothering Matthew during busy shifts. I told her those weren't real skills, and she grabbed my shoulders and said Tara's voice was still in my head, making me think I wasn't capable. She made me practice interview answers right there between the milk and yogurt. She asked what my biggest strength was, and I said I showed up on time. She said that was good, but I needed more. So we kept going until I could list 5 things without hesitating. Paul's mother called that night while I was making dinner. She said Tara had been thinking about everything and wanted to move past the incident for Lucy's sake. I stirred the pasta and asked what moving past it meant. She said maybe we could all meet somewhere neutral and talk things through as a family. I told her I'd be willing to meet, but only after Tara wrote a genuine apology letter to Lucy first. The line went quiet for a few seconds. She asked if I was setting conditions, and I said yes, I was, because Lucy deserved a real apology before we pretended everything was fine. She sounded surprised, but said she'd talk to Tara about it. Matthew called me into his office Friday afternoon and said my interview was scheduled for Monday at 2. I thanked him and went back to my register with my heart beating fast. That evening, Paul came home and said his family had been texting him all day about fixing things with Tara. He looked tired when he sat down at the kitchen table. He said everyone was pressuring him and he was exhausted from being stuck in the middle of this mess. I put down the dish I was washing and told him he wasn't in the middle. I said he was supposed to be on his wife and daughter's side, not balancing between us and his sister like we were equal options. He stood up and said I was making this harder than it needed to be. I asked how I was making it hard by expecting him to defend his family from someone who publicly humiliated us. He said Tara was his family too, and I was being unfair. We argued louder than we had in years. I told him his sister called me dumb in front of 30 people and traumatized our daughter. He said Tara apologized already, and I was holding a grudge. I said she never apologized, she just justified what she did. He grabbed his keys and said he needed space. Lucy's voice came from the stairs asking if we were getting divorced because of Aunt Tara's shirts. We both stopped and turned to see her standing there in her pajamas with tears running down her face. Paul dropped his keys and went to her immediately. I followed and we both hugged her and promised we weren't getting divorced. She cried into my shoulder and asked why we were fighting so much. I told her we were figuring some things out, but we loved each other and we loved her. Paul carried her back to bed and we stayed with her until she fell asleep. Later that night, Paul admitted he'd been scared to say what was really bothering him. We sat on the couch in the dark and he told me he'd always felt less than Tara. She was the successful one with the big salary and important job title. He was just a middle management accountant who made decent money but nothing impressive. He said her approval mattered to him more than he wanted to admit. He said he didn't know how to choose between his sister and his wife because choosing felt like losing someone either way. I felt sad listening to him because I realized he'd been carrying this for years. Sunday morning, I asked Paul to sit down at the kitchen table because we needed to talk seriously. I explained that setting boundaries with Tara wasn't about rejecting her or cutting her out of our lives. I said it was about protecting Lucy from ongoing harm. I told him we could have a relationship with his family, but not at the cost of our daughter's self-esteem and mental health. He listened without interrupting. I said Lucy needed to see her parents standing up for her and teaching her that people don't get to treat you badly just because they're family. He nodded slowly and said he understood. He admitted he'd been so focused on keeping peace that he forgot his first job was protecting his daughter. Monday afternoon, my phone rang during lunch and Matthew's name showed up. I answered and he offered me the assistant manager position with a raise to $16 an hour. I couldn't speak for a few seconds because I was so shocked. He asked if I was still there and I said yes and thank you over and over. I called Hadley right after and she screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Then I drove to Lucy's school and waited outside until dismissal. When she came out, I told her I got promoted to assistant manager. She hugged me tight and said she knew I was smart. That night, I told Paul about the promotion while we were cleaning up after dinner. He smiled and said he was happy for me and proud of me, but something seemed off in the way he looked away when I mentioned the pay raise. Later, when we were getting ready for bed, he admitted he makes less per hour than I would now. He said it quietly, like he was embarrassed. I realized his identity was wrapped up in being the one who made more money and provided for the family. My success was threatening something he'd built his self-worth around. I talked to Paul that night after Lucy finally fell asleep and told him I felt proud of myself for standing up to his family. He nodded but didn't say much and went to bed early. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was getting ready for my first official day as assistant manager. Tara's name appeared on the screen with a text message. I opened it expecting more nastiness, but instead it said, "Congratulations on finally moving up after 9 years." The backhanded part stung for a second, but then I started laughing because it was so predictable. Paul heard me and asked what was funny. I showed him the text and he frowned and said she was trying to be nice. I told him it didn't matter anymore because her opinion was starting to mean less to me every day. He looked relieved, like he'd been worried I'd stay angry forever. My first week as assistant manager threw me into situations I'd never handled before. A supplier delivery came wrong and I had to call the warehouse and negotiate a rush replacement. 2 employees got into an argument about shift coverage and I sat them down and worked out a compromise. The computer system crashed during peak hours, and I kept everyone calm while we processed transactions manually. Every challenge scared me at first, but then I'd figure it out and feel this surge of confidence. The team responded better than I expected because I'd worked alongside them for 9 years and understood what they dealt with every day. Matthew watched me handle a difficult customer who wanted to return spoiled produce without a receipt, and afterward told me I had good instincts for management. I saved that compliment in my head to replay when doubt crept in. Paul's mother called on Thursday evening while I was folding laundry. She said Tara had written an apology letter for Lucy and asked if she could bring it over. I hesitated because I didn't trust anything from Tara, but agreed because maybe it would help Lucy. She arrived an hour later holding a sealed white envelope with Lucy's name written in Tara's neat handwriting. Lucy came downstairs and her grandmother handed her the envelope with a hopeful smile. Lucy's hands shook a little as she opened it and I stood behind her reading over her shoulder. The letter started with an apology for hurting Lucy's feelings at the party. Then it explained that Tara was trying to motivate Lucy to value education, because college opens doors and creates opportunities. The second page listed scholarships Lucy should start thinking about for the future, including specific programs for gifted students. There was information about STEM camps and academic competitions, and a note about how important it is to start planning for college and elementary school. Lucy read it twice, looking more confused each time. She looked up at me and asked if Aunt Tara was still mad at me. I felt my stomach tighten because this wasn't a real apology at all. I walked Paul's mother into the kitchen and told her this wasn't acceptable. She asked what I meant because Tara had apologized. I explained that a genuine apology acknowledges harm without justification or conditions. I said real apologies don't include a but or an explanation that makes it the other person's fault. She shifted uncomfortably and said, "Tara has always struggled to admit when she's completely wrong." I realized this pattern went deeper than just Tara's personality. The whole family had learned to excuse bad behavior by focusing on good intentions. Paul's mother admitted she'd made similar excuses for Tara her whole life because Tara was so successful and smart. I told her that success doesn't give someone permission to hurt people, and she nodded slowly, like she'd never thought about it that way before. 2 weeks into my new position, a customer came in furious because we'd sold her expired milk. She was yelling and demanding to speak to the owner and threatening to report us to health inspectors. I stayed calm and listened to everything she said without interrupting. Then I apologized sincerely and explained our quality control process and how this mistake happened. I gave her a full refund plus a gift card and personally checked every dairy product on the shelf while she watched. She left satisfied and apparently called the district manager to praise how I handled the situation. The district manager sent Matthew an email specifically mentioning my problem-solving skills and professional attitude. Matthew printed it out and showed it to me in his office. I read it 3 times and then saved a photo of it on my phone to look at when I doubted myself. Lucy's counseling appointment that week brought unexpected progress. Cordelia called me back after the session and said Lucy had a breakthrough. Lucy told her she decided her mom is smart in different ways than Aunt Tara, and that both kinds of smart are okay. She said her mom is good at helping people and fixing problems and making people feel better. Cordelia explained that Lucy was developing healthy perspective and resilience. She recommended we space out sessions to once a month instead of weekly, because Lucy was processing everything in constructive ways. I cried in the parking lot after that call because my daughter was going to be okay. That night I told Paul we needed marriage counseling. He asked why, and I said because I can't keep living with someone who won't defend me to his family. He got defensive and said he was trying his best. I told him his best wasn't good enough when it came to protecting his wife and daughter from cruelty. He went quiet for a long time and then finally agreed. Our first session the following week felt awkward and tense. The therapist asked us each to describe the main issue, and Paul talked about feeling caught between his family and me. I explained that his conflict avoidance enabled Tara's behavior and hurt me deeply. The therapist helped Paul see how his silence at the party sent Lucy a message that what Tara did was acceptable. He looked shocked, like he'd never connected those dots before. 3 weeks after the party, my phone buzzed with another text from Tara. This one asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. I stared at it for 10 minutes, trying to decide. Paul saw me looking at my phone and asked what was wrong. I showed him, and he said maybe I should hear what she has to say. I was hesitant, but also curious what she wanted to say without an audience. I texted back and agreed to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our houses on Saturday morning. Saturday, I arrived at the coffee shop early and ordered a latte. Tara walked in exactly on time, wearing expensive workout clothes and carrying a designer purse. She ordered a complicated drink and sat down across from me. We didn't speak until she had her coffee, and then she took a deep breath. She admitted she'd been jealous of my relationship with Lucy. She said Lucy adores me in a way her own kids don't seem to adore her. She works 60 hours a week and barely sees her children, and when she does see them, they're tired or busy or asking for things. She said she made the shirts because she's frustrated with her own choices and took it out on me. Her voice cracked a little when she talked about missing her kids' school events and bedtimes. I sat there processing this confession and realizing Tara's cruelty came from a place of deep unhappiness with her own life. I stirred my coffee and looked at her expensive workout clothes and her designer purse sitting on the table between us. She was waiting for me to say something, but I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Her jealousy explained the cruelty, but it didn't excuse what she did to Lucy in front of 30 people. I set my cup down and leaned forward. Your jealousy doesn't excuse publicly humiliating me and making my daughter cry at her own birthday party. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know that now. I just thought you'd laugh it off because you're always so easygoing about everything. You never get mad when I make comments. I realized right then that she'd mistaken my politeness for weakness. All those times I'd smiled and changed the subject when she bragged about her salary or made digs about my job, she thought I didn't care. She thought I had no boundaries because I never enforced any. That wasn't easygoing. That was me being polite because you're Paul's sister and I didn't want to cause problems. She looked uncomfortable and picked at her napkin. I didn't realize I was hurting you. You never said anything. I wanted to point out that most people don't need to be told that calling someone dumb is hurtful, but I kept my voice steady. I'm saying something now. What you did traumatized Lucy. She had nightmares for a week. Her face went pale and she looked genuinely upset. I never meant to hurt Lucy. I love her. I was trying to motivate her. I shook my head. You were trying to hurt me and you used Lucy to do it. That's worse. She sat with that for a minute and I watched her process it. Finally, she asked what it would take for us to move forward. I'd thought about this before coming here. A genuine apology to Lucy in person. No more comments about my education or my job ever. And you respect the boundaries I set from now on. She shifted in her seat and I could tell she was uncomfortable giving up the superior position she'd held in our relationship. Okay, I can do that. Her voice was quiet. When can I apologize to Lucy? I told her I'd talk to Paul and we'd set something up. She nodded and we finished our coffee in awkward silence. When we left the coffee shop, she hugged me and it felt stiff but genuine. I drove home wondering if she'd actually follow through or if this was just another performance. The following Sunday afternoon, our doorbell rang and I opened it to find Tara standing alone on the porch. Paul had warned Lucy that her aunt was coming to talk to her, and Lucy had been nervous all morning. I let Tara in and called Lucy downstairs. Lucy came down slowly and stood next to me holding my hand. Tara knelt down so she was at Lucy's eye level. Lucy, I came to apologize for hurting your feelings and making your party bad. What I did was mean and wrong. Lucy looked at her carefully. Do you really think Mommy is dumb? Tara glanced up at me and then back at Lucy. No, sweetie. I said mean things I didn't really believe because I was having a bad day. Your mommy is very smart in ways that matter. I was wrong. Lucy seemed to think about this. Okay, I forgive you, Aunt Tara. Tara's eyes got watery and she hugged Lucy. Thank you. I promise I'll be nicer. After a few more minutes of awkward conversation, Tara left, and Lucy went back upstairs to play. Paul came out of the kitchen where he'd been listening. That went well. I nodded, but I was still cautious about whether Tara would actually change. That evening, Lucy came and sat next to me on the couch while I was reading. Mommy, do people say mean things when they're sad inside? I put my book down and pulled her close. Sometimes, yes. When people are unhappy with themselves, they sometimes take it out on other people. It doesn't make it okay, but it explains why they do it. She was quiet for a minute. Was Aunt Tara sad inside when she gave you those shirts? I explained that Aunt Tara was struggling with her own choices and took her frustration out on me. Lucy asked if that meant she should feel sorry for Aunt Tara, and I told her she could feel sorry for her and still know what she did was wrong. We talked for a while about hurt people hurting others, and I was proud watching her develop empathy even after being wounded. She was processing this in such a healthy way, and I could see her resilience growing. Later that night, after Lucy went to bed, I sat in her room for a few minutes just watching her sleep. She was going to be okay. We were going to be okay. Paul's therapy homework that week was to practice setting boundaries with his family. I didn't think much of it until Thursday evening when his mother called during dinner. Paul answered, and I could hear her voice through the phone criticizing how we let Lucy stay up too late on the school nights. Paul usually just agreed with whatever his mother said, but this time he took a breath. "Mom, that's not helpful. We've got Lucy's bedtime handled." There was silence on the other end, and then his mother said something I couldn't hear. Paul stayed firm. "I know you're trying to help, but Nicole and I make the parenting decisions for Lucy." After he hung up, he looked surprised at himself and a little proud. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. He was learning to protect our family instead of just keeping the peace. At work the next week, I noticed we were losing new employees within their first month. They'd get overwhelmed during rushes and quit without giving notice. I started thinking about how I learned the job 9 years ago and realized nobody had trained me properly either. I just figured it out through trial and error. I talked to Matthew about creating a buddy system where new employees shadowed experienced ones for their first 2 weeks instead of being thrown into busy shifts alone. He liked the idea and told me to implement it. Over the next month, our new employee turnover dropped significantly. Matthew called me into his office and said he'd told the district manager it was my idea. The district manager visited our store the following week specifically to talk to me about my training approach. She asked detailed questions about how I structured the buddy system and what metrics I used to measure success. I realized while talking to her that I had expertise worth sharing. I knew how to break down complex tasks into simple steps. I knew how to make new employees feel supported instead of overwhelmed. I knew how to build confidence in people who were scared of making mistakes. These were skills I'd developed over 9 years, and I'd never thought of them as valuable before. 2 months after the birthday party, Lucy's teacher sent an email that made me cry at my kitchen table. She wrote that Lucy was back to her normal, confident self, and had even volunteered to give a presentation about different kinds of smart for Career Day. Lucy had included me as an example of someone who's good with people and solving problems. She told her class that her mom helps customers find things and makes them feel better when they're having bad days. She said her mom is smart about feelings and being kind. The teacher said several students went home and told their parents they wanted to be like Lucy's mom when they grew up. I read the email 3 times, and each time I cried harder. My daughter saw my worth even when I struggled to see it myself. Paul and I had our regular counseling session that Wednesday, and something shifted. The therapist asked Paul why he didn't defend me at the party, and he sat quietly for a long time. Finally, he admitted he was ashamed of defending me because part of him agreed with Tara's assessment. The words hit me like a physical blow. Hearing him say out loud that he thought I wasn't smart enough or successful enough hurt worse than anything Tara had done. At least Tara was his sister. Paul was supposed to be my partner. The therapist helped us work through it, and Paul cried while apologizing. He said he'd been conditioned by his family to value education and career success above everything else. He said watching me stand up to Tara made him realize how strong I was, and how wrong he'd been. It was painful but also clarifying. We couldn't rebuild our marriage on the foundation we had before. We needed to build something new based on actual respect and trust. November arrived, and Paul's mother called to confirm we were coming to Thanksgiving at their house. Paul looked at me nervously while she talked. I'd been thinking about this for weeks. I told Paul I was willing to go, but I'd leave immediately if anyone made comments about my education or job. He supported my boundary and called his mother back to warn the family in advance. She sounded annoyed but agreed to tell everyone. The days leading up to Thanksgiving, I felt anxious but also determined. I wasn't going to hide or avoid his family forever. I was going to show up as myself, and if they couldn't respect that, then I'd leave. Thanksgiving afternoon, we arrived at Paul's mother's house with Lucy and a pie I'd made. Tara was already there with Jason and their kids. She came over immediately and complimented my promotion to assistant manager. Her tone seemed forced, but at least she was trying. Jason avoided me completely, which was fine with me. I had no interest in talking to someone who thought humiliating people were motivational. Paul stayed close to me and Lucy the whole time. When his uncle started to make a comment about community college, Paul cut him off and changed the subject. When Tara's kids asked Lucy about school, Paul made sure to mention Lucy's presentation about different kinds of smart. He was showing his family where his loyalty was now. We stayed for 3 hours and then left. In the car, Lucy said it wasn't as bad as she thought it would be. Paul reached over and held my hand while he drove. We were healing. All 3 of us were healing. December arrived with Lucy asking if she could invite Aunt Tara to her school holiday concert. I looked up from folding laundry and tried to hide my surprise. After everything that happened, I didn't expect Lucy to want Tara anywhere near her special events. But Lucy explained that her music teacher said families should come support the students, and she wanted to give Aunt Tara another chance. I agreed because Lucy seemed genuinely hopeful, and I didn't want my own hurt feelings to stop her from rebuilding relationships on her terms. The concert was on a Tuesday evening in the school gym, and Tara showed up alone without Jason, which I appreciated. She sat 3 rows behind us and clapped politely during Lucy's class performance. Afterward, Lucy ran over to her, and Tara knelt down and told her she was proud of how well she sang. Lucy beamed and asked if Aunt Tara liked her solo part, and Tara said it was beautiful. I watched them talk for a few minutes and saw something shift between them. Tara wasn't being condescending or making comparisons. She was just being an aunt telling her niece she did a good job. When Lucy ran off to find her friends, Tara came over to Paul and me. She thanked us for letting her come and said she was working on being better about boundaries. I nodded and told her I appreciated that, and we left it there. It wasn't a big emotional moment, but it felt like actual progress built on respect instead of forced apologies. My 3-month review as assistant manager happened the following week, and Matthew scheduled it for a Thursday morning before the store opened. I sat in his office nervous even though I knew I'd been doing well. Matthew pulled out the evaluation form and went through each category, marking exceeds expectations for every single one. He praised my leadership during the Thanksgiving rush, and mentioned how the new training system I created reduced turnover by 20%. Then he leaned back in his chair and said there was a store manager training program starting in January. He asked if I would consider applying because the district manager specifically mentioned my name after visiting our location. I sat there stunned because 9 months ago I was scanning groceries thinking I'd never advance beyond that. Now I was encouraged to train for store manager, which would mean another significant raise and real career growth. I told Matthew I was interested and he handed me the application packet. That night I showed Paul the forms and he looked genuinely excited for me. He said watching me grow professionally made him proud, and he could see how much confidence I'd gained since taking the assistant manager role. Our anniversary fell on a Saturday in mid-December, and Paul planned a nice dinner at the Italian restaurant where we had our first date. We left Lucy with Paul's mother, who'd been making more effort to support our family boundaries. At dinner, Paul handed me a card before we ordered, and I opened it expecting something standard. Instead, he'd written a long message about being proud of the strength I showed standing up for myself and Lucy. He admitted that watching me set boundaries with his family taught him he could do the same. He wrote that our marriage felt stronger than it had in years, because we were finally being honest about what we needed from each other. I cried reading it because those words meant everything after months of feeling like he didn't see my worth. Paul reached across the table and held my hand and said he was sorry it took something as awful as the shirt incident to wake him up. He promised to keep choosing our family first, and I believed him because his actions over the past months backed up those words. Lucy's next therapy appointment with Cordelia happened the Tuesday before Christmas, and I sat in the waiting room expecting our usual monthly check-in. But Cordelia called me into the office after her session with Lucy and said she thought we could end regular appointments. Lucy had processed the birthday party incident and developed healthy ways to handle her feelings when people said hurtful things. Cordelia explained that Lucy showed remarkable resilience, and the trauma from that day no longer controlled her emotions or self-image. She recommended we call if any issues came up, but didn't think Lucy needed ongoing therapy anymore. That night after dinner, Lucy was helping me clear the table and suddenly said she was glad Aunt Tara made her mad at the party. I stopped loading the dishwasher and asked why. Lucy said because it helped her see how strong her mommy is, and now she knows being strong matters more than being perfect. She said watching me stand up to Aunt Tara taught her she could stand up for herself too. I pulled her into a hug and realized we'd turned something meant to break us down into an opportunity for both of us to grow stronger and more sure of who we are.